The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, in December 2024, when we left this House, some of us were printing out our CVs. In January 2025, a serious crisis was brewing with the U.S. With three main axes, there was the tariff axis, which was ultimately temporary, though serious, because tariffs are a tool of intimidation or a response to such an attempt at intimidation. Then there was a trade crisis with efforts to a new free trade agreement or a less free trade agreement. And then finally, in third place, something that we used to think was perhaps a joke and would always be a joke, but we can now realize that it might have been serious. And ultimately, all of the uncertainty caused by that threat from the U.S. was used to benefit the liberal campaign. Now we know that very quickly there was a liberal leadership campaign. And then the liberal leader was chosen, new ministers were chosen, and then there was an election. So very quickly, during this crisis, we were told, in fact, by the Prime Minister himself on Radio-Canada, that if there was no crisis, there would be no Mark Carney. I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to name him, but this is a quote. But then yesterday, we all laughed a great deal when we heard that during the throne speech, there was not a single word about the tariff crisis and nothing about the trade crisis. Meanwhile, a foreign monarch came to tell us all about Canadian sovereignty, even though he's actually someone else's king, a very dashing king. What happened to the crisis? We all seem to know that there was this big crisis. Well, it was very useful to the Liberals, let me say that. So, are we saying that the crisis is over just because the Prime Minister is who he is? Is it just because he was already the incumbent Prime Minister and he still is? Did that fix the crisis? He says that the reason for which he decided to run that very reason, what he says made him run, did not even show up in his own throne speech. Instead, he's bringing in an unheard of level of centralization, both in reality and in terms of his intentions. Once again, in the area of health, once again, this government is intruding into an area of Quebec and provincial jurisdiction. Same thing for both Medicare and dental care. It's nonsense because ultimately the federal government, which knows less about the area, is going to be doing these tasks and it's going to take longer and be more expensive. And the same thing applies to childcare. And of course, there's a reason the federal government is doing this. It knows that when it places the finances of Quebec under strain, it can better control Quebec. It can better dominate Quebec. There's also been an environmental centralization because the federal government wants to bulldoze over Canadian environmental standards in order to bring in pipelines, despite the fact that the Quebec BAP, the Environmental Assessment Agency, is a legal obligation. We can't just run around stampeding all over legal obligations, and yet here we are. And then they also want to make a unified economy. They want a single pan-Canadian economy, despite the fact that each Canadian province has its own economic tools. And not only that, they perform differently, using different tools with different results on the basis of a different economic reality. This principle of a single pan-Canadian economy was unanimously criticized by all members of the National Assembly of Quebec. So either this government doesn't care at all about what the members of the National Assembly of Quebec say, or they just are unaware. Earlier, during question period, I heard a bunch of questions from members from the west of Canada, and they don't seem to be happy about this either. They don't seem happy at all about the idea that there would be a single pan-Canadian economy that would trample all over them. And this government is also showing a centralizing attitude towards Canadian multiculturalism, which Quebecers don't usually appreciate because it denies Canadians' linguistic specificity. It denies Quebec's specificity in terms of values, as well as Quebec's specific immigration challenges, because our immigration challenges are not the same as elsewhere. And of course, this applies to the linguistic and values aspects of immigration. The good thing about a throne speech is that it comes right out. It comes right out and says what it wants to say. Basically, a throne speech is just saying, regardless of what other people think, here's the vision that we're going to apply. And the throne speech showed a real ignorance in regard to parliamentarianism, in regard to our legislative processes. Because ultimately, the real power should lie with our elected officials and parliamentarians. It's a little bit like the image I mentioned earlier during question period. It's a little bit like Canada, if Canada were a bank, with a few branches in Moncton, Vancouver, Quebec City, and so on, as if Canada were a central bank with various cities that act as the branches of the bank and that take their marching orders from the head banker. I am not saying this with malice, but this way of doing things bothers Quebecers, and it bothers Quebec MNAs. And of course, the federal government is doing this so it can have control over the public coffers, and then it can threaten the provinces with removing money or restricting money, but the provinces won't dare to raise taxes. And so this way, the federal government can further consolidate power and finances into its own hands.
Moreover, there are 22 of us. This might not surprise you, but here comes the truth. Climate change exists. It is a real thing. Climate change exists, and it is destroying the environment at a very rapid pace. It is destroying lives and is incredibly expensive. It costs Canadian families thousands of dollars each year in insurance, in higher grocery costs, in taxes to cover repairs and rebuilding. It costs more than we actually spend to fight climate change. When the Prime Minister led Brookfield, we need to believe that he then believed in climate change because, on paper, it was a green investment fund. But in fact, half of the green investment fund was actually a black investment fund because it went to oil. The Prime Minister will have to clear that up for us. When he led Brookfield, did he believe in fighting climate change, or was it just a way to attract investment? Climate change was not at all mentioned in the speech from the throne. We usually talk about climate change often. Repentigny has given us the environment and climate change Wayne Gretzky, who is going to help us out with this. We're wondering whether there's any care for the environment anywhere on the government benches. Maybe perhaps the former environment minister? Apparently now is not the time to talk about climate change, immigration, values, the French language. Apparently now is not the time to talk about pensioners. It's not the right time to talk about anything, apparently, because we're in a crisis. But we're told that there will be a time to discuss these things, and we will be ready to do so. We need to build wealth with environment and the economy going hand in hand. Currently, the profit we're generating is ending up in very few pockets and spent on massive ships somewhere in the Mediterranean, but it's not actually benefiting the taxpayer, who's always paying more and receiving less and less. And yet, we will have to find a way to work together. Quebecers and Canadians voted for a banker prime minister so that he could negotiate with the United States. $4 billion will be spent to reimburse a tax that we didn't pay for. We didn't pay for it. I don't understand it. But Canadians, not including Quebecers, got $4 billion. But Quebecers did not get a penny because we have our own carbon market. We did not receive rebate payments. All the subterfuge behind this is not especially transparent. I would like to remind this Parliament that Canada owes Quebecers $800 million. I'm going to repeat that as long as I need to until the money is received. You were bold enough to say to Quebecers, we've invented something fake. It's fake, and we're going to get money from it. But everyone is going to get money. Everyone's going to get the rebate, but not you because you're just Quebecers. Next, $6 billion in tax cuts. Legislation will be presented soon. Well, this money is useless. The finance minister said that there would be a full economic statement and a budget next year. The prime minister had said, nobody, there will be a budget this fall. The tax cuts won't apply before the 1st of January 2026. So that legislation will be useful if there's no budget. Next, $20 million in counter tariffs. That's billions, $30 billion added to this year's deficit in Canada. Justin Trudeau must be saying, well, I didn't spend enough. I could have spent a lot more. I wasn't brave enough. We have no economic update. We have no budget. But we need to believe that we haven't been played. Now, Quebec is different. During the election campaign, we talked about 8 sectors which are not exclusive and which are unique to Quebec's economy. Aluminum, strategic minerals, supply management, aerospace, forestry and lumber, clean energy, culture, because, of course, Quebec's culture is very different, and we will not be eaten up by other culture, and fisheries. We discussed solutions during the campaign. Nowhere in the speech from the throne can we find the word solution. We suggested wage subsidies, research and transfers to businesses to make them more competitive, diversifying markets. I went to Europe. I discussed market diversification with representatives of European countries. We also suggested things for productivity, public contracts, supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, preserving our purchasing power, the military. I know more about our economy than the new Grand Master. We proposed a whole host of solutions. I took part in making those suggestions, but none of them were taken. It's as if the government is saying, I'm not taking away your house, but I'm taking your garage. Tomorrow I'm coming for your bedroom. And the following day I'll take your kitchen. You'll still have a house, but all you'll have left is the bones of the house, maybe the basement. We need to be able to agree on certain things. As I was saying, we need to get through the crisis. During the campaign, we listened to Quebecers and we promised to work as hard as possible on working together to find shared ground, to find some middle ground between how Quebec sees itself and how Canada sees itself. The Bloc Québécois doesn't have a monopoly over how Quebec sees itself. But Quebec's National Assembly has been very clear in affirming that Quebec has one parliament, and it is the parliament that speaks for Quebecers. You can speak to what you envision for Canada. We can speak to what Quebec envisions for itself. There will always be issues related to language, environment, economy. But we will do our utmost to work alongside others in this place because Quebecers are watching us and we are here to represent them and make their voices heard. We're going to agree using what Quebecers have given us, which is the balance of power in committees. Here, we have a certain weight given the breakdown of parties in Parliament, but committees will be presided by Liberals. When the Liberals disagree with the Conservatives, which is often the case, Quebec will be able to weigh in a way that makes a difference. We will need to negotiate. And as I've said many times, we are ready to find common ground and to negotiate in good faith. Before we exercise our balance of power, we can try to agree. But in committee, we may come up against disagreements. As a test of good faith, starting today, I wish to put forward a sub-amendment to the Conservative amendment to the speech from the throne. I move, seconded by the member for Berthier-Masquinongé, Saint-Jean, seconded by the member for Saint-Jean, that the amendment be amended by adding the following. Out of respect for jurisdiction, Quebec's jurisdiction, and out of respect for Quebec's institutions, and out of respect for those of all other provinces too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Monsieur Blanchet.
Mr. Blanchet, seconded by Ms. Normandin, moves that the amendment be amended by adding the following. With respect for the areas of jurisdiction and institutions of Quebec and the provinces.
Amendment is in order. Questions and comments? Questions and comments? The member for Beauce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program is essential to our regions, and it's incredibly important in Beauce. The Liberals have not given many details about that in the speech from the throne. The program has already been cut in the past. What is the Bloc's position regarding the Temporary Foreign Worker Program? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tremblay.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Temporary immigration is a rather complex matter. The intention is always, I believe, well-intentioned, or could be. Sometimes it's really instrumentalized, though, for rather murky purposes. Currently, when it comes to foreign students, it's essential for them and for their country, but also for Quebec's university network, for instance. As for temporary foreign workers, they are essential to many economic sectors, especially in our regions. But within these types of temporary immigration, there are gaps and issues. For instance, asylum seekers. I've expressed our issues with that. We think that all provinces should share their fair share of asylum seekers. There are also people who are skirting the rules in the system. We need to solve that. In the case of temporary foreign workers, there are problems. Some temporary foreign workers don't end up staying temporarily. They renew and renew. They end up settling in Canada. They may not integrate fully into society, and that can cause social issues. Now, we run our own system. It's up to us, not up to those who seek to profit from the system. I cannot stand against something that's good for my colleagues' riding, while also being good for many ridings in Quebec. So it may be dogmatic, or it might be electioneering to say that we will cut temporary immigration, but we need to do it properly and to discuss how to go about it without harming these foreign temporary workers and without harming Canada's businesses and sectors. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. It is indeed Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. You got it right, and I'm proud to represent the people of my riding. I listened attentively to my colleague's speech. I wonder how he and his team intend to work with the government. He mentioned us working together. How does he intend to work with us for a strong and free Quebec, especially when it comes to tariffs and the trade war with our neighbours to the south? Thank you. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. For someone who listened carefully, I feel that she was not really listening. The answer is in my final statement. Whatever the Canadian government seeks to do, it should do so with respect for the areas of jurisdiction and institutions of Quebec. We would not take issue with that, but that would cut 80% of the speech from the throne. We want Quebec respected. We want Quebec's areas of jurisdiction and institutions respected. For example, our environmental assessment agency in Quebec called BAP, we want that respected. We will have serious, constructive conversations among partners.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte-Acton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my first time asking a question to my party leader. I'm sure he will thank me for my hard work and for my high-quality question. We know that Ottawa has a long history of using crises in order to centralize things even more. We've also heard on many occasions many issues repeated many times, such as having one economy rather than 13. Quebec, though, has been trying since the 60s to build a distinct, unique economy for itself with its own uniqueness, how it handles SMEs, its social values, for instance. My colleague, how did he feel about hearing the Prime Minister talk about unity so many times, given that the National Assembly unanimously expressed its concerns?
L'honorable député de Belleuil.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll answer the most interesting part of the question. Quebec's economy is incredibly different from Canada's economy. 60 or so years ago, we were French Canadians on English Canada's payroll. About 60 years ago, René Lévesque took the very important step of nationalizing our electricity. That was the first step. It belonged to us. It led to the creation of an entire model. Now, we can't change our geography, but that led to a model in Quebec where we balance Quebec's economic development with respect for the environment and green development. Some say that we need an east-west oil-based economy for Canada to succeed. Nobody thinks that. North American markets are north-south, and then exports go from there. We want an SME-based economy with its resources. We won't have 5 weeks, though, like during the campaign. Now I have 4 years of time during which I have a lot to accomplish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the campaign, my constituents expressed deep concern about the rising crime in our community. Did the Bloc Québécois see anything in the throne speech that would address this serious issue facing our country and our communities?
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The honourable for Belleuil-Chambly. I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, that we will always agree with Conservatives on the means. They still seem to think that removing someone from society was required on a preventative basis. There is a certain negligence when it comes to criminality and its sources, and a weakness in responding to criminality, and it worries a lot of people. I see it through a lens of young families, those who have children, and who fear that when their children go to school, especially at the secondary level, will be bullied or will bully someone with violence, through a culture of violence. And that's where we have to begin. That's where we have to act. Some people will say, well, it might not work for some. Then yes, for some people we have to undertake severe measures. We have to make sure that a fundamental right, we have to make sure that this fundamental right is respected. That is, to live in a safe environment in our streets and in our schools.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Winnipeg North. There's not much time left.
Just very quickly, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that the leader of the Bloc Party was factually incorrect when he makes statements such as a reflection of the province of Quebec's interest not being reflected inside the throne speech, when in fact issues like supply management's in the throne speech, issues like Radio Canada, CBC is inside the throne speech, and I'm wondering if you want to retract that particular comment.
Bravo.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, people don't change, do they? As a response to that, just writing on a piece of paper isn't really a policy. Just reading a book would just be reading a lot of policy, apparently. There's a word, there's a term, supply management, but not enough is done to defend supply management. Just having the word Radio-Canada doesn't a policy make. I would like to see more from those who can actually act. Not everything I say is a reproach, but just because a word is in a certain document means that that word will be protected forevermore.